Family dinners were supposed to be safe, predictable, slightly boring. That night started exactly like that, with the usual clatter of plates, forced smiles, and my sister dominating the conversation, as if she were hosting a talk show no one asked for. She'd always been like this, loud, charming, and dangerously convinced that everything she did was funny if people laughed afterward. We were gathered at my parents' house to celebrate a small promotion I'd earned at work. Nothing dramatic, no speeches, just food and a little acknowledgement that I existed. My sister, of course, couldn't stand that the attention wasn't on her. She kept interrupting, cracking jokes, rolling her eyes whenever someone congratulated me. I noticed it, but I ignored it. I always did. Toward the end of dinner, she disappeared into the kitchen and came back carrying a plate with a homemade dessert. She set it down in front of me with a grin that felt too rehearsed. "Relax," she said casually. "It's sugar-free. You're always so dramatic." That line should have stopped me. Everyone in the family knew about my severe nut allergy. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't mild. I'd carried an EpiPen since childhood. My sister had seen me rush to the hospital before. Still, she said it so lightly, so confidently that I trusted her. Because that's what you do with family. You assume they won't hurt you on purpose. I took a bite. At first, nothing happened. I even felt a flicker of embarrassment for hesitating. Then the warning signs crept in quietly, like something stalking me from the inside. A strange warmth spread across my face. My tongue tingled. My chest felt tight, as if someone had wrapped a belt around my lungs and started pulling. I tried to swallow. I couldn't. The room blurred at the edges. My heart slammed violently against my ribs. I dropped the spoon, gripping the table as panic surged through me. I heard my own breathing turn into a harsh, broken sound that didn't feel human. Someone asked if I was okay. Someone else shouted my name. I looked at my sister. Her smile was gone. In its place was something raw and ugly, shock mixed with fear. "I only added a little," she said, her voice shaking. I thought it would be funny. My knees buckled. The last thing I remember before hitting the floor was my mother screaming and someone yelling to call an ambulance. Her joke had landed, and I was the one collapsing under it. Consciousness returned slowly, like light leaking through thick fog. At first, there was only sound, the steady, mechanical beeping of a monitor, distant voices, the hiss of oxygen. My body felt heavy, unresponsive, as if it didn't belong to me anymore. When I finally managed to open my eyes, harsh white light stabbed at my vision. I was in a hospital room. A nurse noticed my movement and leaned closer, her voice calm but serious. "You're in the ICU, try not to move." Tubes ran into my arms. A mask covered part of my face. My throat burned, raw and swollen, every breath feeling like it had to fight its way in. Moments later, a doctor entered. He didn't soften his words. He didn't need to. "You experienced a severe anaphylactic shock," he said. "Your airway was almost completely closed. If the ambulance had arrived 5 minutes later, we might be having a very different conversation." The meaning of his words settled heavily in the room. I hadn't just been sick. I had nearly died. My parents stood at the foot of the bed, pale and shaken. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for mine, whispering my name again and again like a prayer. My father couldn't meet my eyes. Guilt hung between us, thick and suffocating. One thing was missing. My sister. Hours passed, then a full day. When she finally appeared, she lingered near the doorway as if unsure she was welcome. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears falling now. She walked closer, arms crossed, defensive. "I didn't think it would be that serious," she said quietly. "I honestly thought you'd just get a rash or something." Her words cut deeper than any needle in my arm. The doctor, still in the room, looked up sharply. "You were minutes from cardiac arrest," he said. This was not a mild reaction. My sister shifted uncomfortably. "It was just a joke," she muttered. "You're always saying you're allergic to everything." That was the moment something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. While machines had been fighting to keep my heart beating, she had been minimizing my life to a punchline. As she left the room, avoiding my eyes, fear finally surfaced on her face, but not fear of losing me. Fear of consequences. Lying there alone afterward, staring at the ceiling, I replayed the night over and over. The laughter, the spoon, the casual cruelty disguised as humor. I realized this wasn't an accident. It was a choice, and as my breathing slowly steadied, a new resolve formed. If she wanted to call it a joke, then the truth would make sure no one ever laughed again. Recovery was slow, painful, and lonely. My body healed faster than my trust ever could. Every beep of the hospital monitor reminded me how close I had come to not waking up at all. Nurses came and went. Doctors explained procedures. But my mind stayed fixed on one thought. This was not an accident. At first, everyone treated it like a terrible mistake. She didn't mean it, my mother kept saying. It was just ignorance. But ignorance doesn't grind nuts into a dessert knowing someone could die from them. Ignorance doesn't joke about allergies. Deep down, I knew the truth, even if no one else wanted to face it. Lying in that hospital bed, I decided I would not let this be brushed away as a family misunderstanding. I started by asking questions. Calm questions, careful questions. I requested my full medical file, emergency room notes, ICU admission reports, allergy test confirmations, and the doctor's written statement that clearly said anaphylactic shock caused by nut ingestion. Every word mattered. Every signature mattered. Then I asked for the toxicology and ingredient analysis from what remained of the dessert. The hospital staff initially looked surprised, but legally I had the right. The results confirmed the presence of ground nuts. Far more than trace contamination. This wasn't accidental cross-contact. This was deliberate inclusion. That's when memory struck me like a cold wave. My parents had installed a small security camera in the kitchen months earlier, after a break-in scare. Everyone knew about it. Everyone, including my sister. It recorded audio, it recorded video, and it stored backups automatically. From my hospital bed, I asked my father to retrieve the footage from that evening. When he came back, his face was pale. He didn't speak at first. He just handed me the tablet. I watched the video in silence. There she was, my sister, standing at the counter, smiling, casually grinding nuts. Then her voice, light and amused, saying words that still echo in my head. She won't even notice. Let's see if she's really allergic. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no concern. I felt something inside me harden. Not anger, clarity. I made copies of everything. Digital backups, physical copies, dates, times, file names clearly labeled. I stored them in cloud drives, USBs, even emailed copies to myself. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being careful. Because I had learned the hardest lesson of all. When someone nearly kills you and calls it a joke, you must protect yourself with facts, not feelings. 3 weeks after I was discharged from the hospital, an unassuming stack of envelopes arrived in my mailbox. White, thick, official. Each one felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of what had happened was finally settling into something tangible. Hospital bills have a way of doing that, turning pain into numbers, trauma into itemized lines. I spread them out across my kitchen table. Emergency ambulance transport, ICU admission, epinephrine injections, oxygen support, continuous cardiac monitoring, specialist consultations, follow-up therapy. The total made my stomach tighten all over again. This wasn't just a medical crisis. It was financial devastation. And none of it would have happened if not for her joke. I didn't rush to confront my sister. I didn't call her in anger or send emotional messages. Instead, I organized everything with calm precision. Each bill was copied. Each medical document was printed. I added the toxicology report and the physician's written statement confirming that the allergic reaction was caused by deliberate exposure to nuts. Finally, I printed a still image from the security footage, the exact moment she added the allergen, smiling at the camera. Evidence doesn't shout, it waits. I placed everything neatly into a large envelope. On top, I added a single-page letter. No insults, no accusations, just facts. I nearly died because of your actions, it read. These are the costs of my survival. At the bottom, one final line. If you choose not to take responsibility, I am prepared to let this evidence speak on my behalf. I delivered the envelope by hand. When she opened it, I watched the color drain from her face page by page. At first, she laughed nervously, assuming this was some dramatic gesture. Then she saw the totals. Then the doctor's words. Then the image from the camera. Her hands started to shake. She looked up at me, eyes wide, and asked, "Are you suing me?" I met her gaze, steady and calm. "I've already consulted a lawyer," I said. "This isn't revenge. This is accountability." For the first time since the incident, she didn't interrupt. She didn't mock. She didn't minimize. The power she'd always carried, the confidence that nothing she did would have consequences, was gone. She tried to bargain. She tried to cry. She even tried to blame stress, saying she didn't think it would be that bad. But excuses have no place when a life is almost lost. I stood up to leave and said one last thing. You decided to experiment with my body. This is the cost of that decision. That night, for the first time since the hospital, I slept peacefully. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had reclaimed control. Justice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes, it arrives in an envelope, addressed to the person who thought they'd never have to pay. The payment came without an apology. No phone call, no tears. Just a bank transfer notification with the exact amount owed, down to the last cent. When I saw it, I didn't feel victory. I felt something quieter and heavier. Closure mixed with loss. My sister avoided me after that. Family gatherings became awkward. Carefully choreographed events where people chose seats like battle lines. My parents tried to act normal, but nothing was normal anymore. They wanted peace, forgiveness, a return to how things were. But how things were had nearly killed me. The truth was no longer hidden. Everyone knew, not just that I had nearly died, but why. The word joke stopped being used. People called it what it was: recklessness, negligence, cruelty disguised as humor. My sister tried once to defend herself. She said she never meant for it to go that far, that she thought my allergy was exaggerated, that social media pranks had blurred her sense of reality. Likes, laughs, reactions mattered more than consequences. She said she was sorry for the outcome, not the act. That difference mattered to me. I realized then that accountability doesn't always come with remorse. Sometimes it comes with distance. Physically, I healed. Slowly. My lungs recovered. The tremors stopped. The nightmares faded. But emotionally, something permanent had shifted. I no longer felt safe around someone I once trusted blindly, and that loss hurt more than the IV needles ever did. I set boundaries, firm ones. I stopped attending events where she was present unless absolutely necessary. I made it clear that my health, physical and mental, was not negotiable. Some family members thought I was being harsh. I reminded them that I had been minutes from death. Harsh would have been silence. Over time, something unexpected happened. People started respecting me more, not because I was loud, but because I was unmovable. I had chosen my life over comfort, truth over pretending, and that choice changed how I carried myself. As for my sister, the consequences followed her quietly. Trust once broken doesn't rebuild easily. Friends distanced themselves. Family watched her differently. Laughter didn't come as freely anymore. Not because I demanded punishment, but because actions have weight. And everyone finally felt it. I don't hate her. Hate would keep me tied to that night forever. But I don't excuse her either. Forgiveness, I learned, is not the same as access. I preserved the evidence not out of revenge, but out of survival. Because sometimes, the only way to be heard is to let the truth speak louder than blood ties. She called it a joke. The hospital called it a medical emergency. The law called it liability. And I call it the moment I chose myself. I survived. And that, in the end, is the only ending that truly matters.